sponsored by Reconciliation Ministry and the Office of General Minister and President. I'm Terry Hoard Owens, so honored and proud to serve as your General Minister and President. And tonight our conversation features panelists from the NAPAD community, our North American Pacific Asian Disciples community. I'm grateful to the Reverend Shonda Jha for helping to organize this set of panelists, and to the Reverend Yvonne Gilmore. Both of these powerful women are core trainers with Reconciliation Ministry. Grateful to Reverend Yvonne for helping to facilitate and organize the entire series. We hope you'll keep this on your calendar every 2 weeks through the beginning of November, right here on our Facebook and YouTube pages, but you can also look for the link to register to be a part of the webinar. I'd like to introduce our facilitator for the evening. There will be time for you to provide us with questions. If you're enrolled in the webinar, please put your questions into the chat. And at the end of the conversation, Reverend Shonda will be helping to facilitate the questions. If you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, on Facebook, you can enter your comments, and we have someone monitoring our Facebook page so that those questions will get to us, and we'll try to take as many questions as we can. Our facilitator tonight is the Reverend Cisa Payuyo. Cisa is an ordained minister in the Christian Church Disciples of Christ and currently serves as the Associate Director of Church Relations at Chapman University in Orange, California. Chapman, as many of you know, is a Disciples of Christ affiliated university. She has been a campus minister involved in young adult ministry at Chapman for the past 17 years. And she is also a past member of the board of directors for NAPAD. Those of you in the Pacific Southwest region know and love Cisa. So I'll hand it over to the Reverend Cisa Payuyo for the conversation. Again, Cisa, thank you so much for agreeing to facilitate our conversation tonight.
Thank you so much, Reverend Terry, and thank you for the opportunity to facilitate this group. I'm so excited tonight to be with my co-panelists, and I'm going to introduce them to you right now. First is Reverend Chung Seong Kim. If you want to wave your hand, Chung Seong, that would be great. Yes. And he is the Executive Minister of the North American Pacific Asian Disciples Christian Church Christ, and comes to us from Indianapolis, Indiana. And he has served in this ministry for the last 5 years. Second is Reverend Nerleb Likisap. Pastor Likisap, could you wave, please, so people know? Yes. He pastors the Chuukese Christian Church of Missouri, located in St. Joseph, Missouri, where he has served since 2017. He is also a member of the board of directors for NAPAD. Yes. Last but not least is Reverend Jennie Huang. Reverend Jennie, yes. She is the Associate Minister of Education and Youth and the youth pastor at the First Chinese Christian Church, Disciples of Christ in Plano, Texas. She started her internship there in 2013 and has officially been in that position with the church since November 2015. So these are our panelists for the evening. People of Asian and Pacific Islander descent have been in this land called the United States for over 400 years. With the landing of Filipinos in Morro Bay in 1587. The 1600s and the 16 and 1700s brought Chinese and Filipinos to these shores, and they kept coming and coming from Chinese and Filipinos to Asian Indians to Japanese workers. We've come and been a part of the United States of America. The stock story is that, or the stock narrative is that America has welcomed everyone to her shores. Yet the concealed, or maybe not so concealed story is that there has been strong anti-Asian sentiment in this country for at least the last 200 years. We can go from the Chinese exclusion law, which suspended US immigration for Chinese workers, to the Chinese in San Francisco who could not attend public schools. They became ineligible for naturalized citizenship and were prohibited from being approved for a marriage license between Mongolians, Negroes, mulattoes, and persons of mixed blood. 1899 to 1902 was the Philippine-American War, which ended in the colonization of the Philippines until they became their own sovereign country in 1946. But between that time of colonization to their own sovereign country, there were good things that happened, but there were so many levels of racism that happened as well. We can go on and on about stories of the things that were possibly good, could be seen as good, but also the many different layers of racism that happened for many of our Asian Americans. Our panelists are here and they have stories to share with you. This series is titled Love is an Action. As these panelists share their stories with you, remember that their stories are stories of love in action. And as we hear and take their stories in, let us think about ways that we can be in action for good from here on in. So let us begin. I'll pose the first question and our panelists will give their answers. Since the beginning of the pandemic, we have heard on national news of racist actions against people of Asian descent. Some have been verbal, some have been dangerously physical. I invite you to share your direct experiences of racism that you'd like to share, or challenges your community is facing due to COVID-19. Pastor Chung Seong, would you like to start us off?
Thank you for this great opportunity of conversation and discussion. Before answering the question, I just want to introduce what is the NAPADism about. North American Pacific Asian Disciple is one of the general unit of disciple church. And we have in our community, we have more than 18 different languages is spoken. And we are fastest growing church among disciples. And we have more than 100 congregation all around United States and Canada. Thinking about the racism against the Asian, I think the most important part of reality is our struggle and then our experience sometimes is invisible to whole community. Many times when the racism happens, we are tended to be more silent, and then our voice is kind of overcome by other voices. So invisibility of our voices is the first racism we can have. And another one is since the COVID-19, and then there's so many violence, verbal and physical violence against our community. According to the statistics I get from April, there's more than 1,000 racist act and then violence a day. So I believe it is increased during the time. The personal experience I have, it is not directly related to the COVID-19, but I am an executive pastor of the Disciple Church. I visiting all over the congregation, and then my work is closely related with the new church ministry. When I visit one region, and then we have a wonderful new church ministry meeting, I explain in how many NAPAD church want to have a church in that region, and then they want to grow, plant church. It was wonderful, and I have a wonderful meeting, 1.5 hours, and then a meeting end. And one gentleman, a white gentleman, older gentleman, approached me after the meeting. And then in my eye, he said that is not kind of growth, church growth we want. That is struck me really hard. We talk about all the church planting and then church growth evangelism. And then that was great. But at the end of that meeting, one person think we are not part of the disciple. So when people think about an Asian community, sometimes still they feel like we are not a part of the whole church. We are stranger. So that is something I want to share with you, not because it is a great story, but because this is something we have to recognize that this ministry, Nathan ministry, is our ministry. We are not the mission field out there to want to receive some help or something. This is our ministry. This is a disciples ministry. I'm the one who is happened to be helping that ministry on behalf of the whole church.
Thank you. Thank you. Pastor Nerleb, would you like to go next?
Yes, first of all, I would like to say my great appreciation for being part on this panel. And I'd like to say on behalf of our Chuukese community, thank you for allowing us to voice our voice, and somebody out there may be willing to listen to our concern or whatever it may be called. And thank you again for the whole church, Disciples of Christ, for allowing us to be part of the ministry of Disciples of Christ here in United States. I like to share some of the incidents that it is like a challenge on us when we started out a church, planting a church in Atlantic, Iowa. And I was taking my youngest daughter with me. And we arrived around evening time. And we were so hungry and nobody was waiting for us. So we just catch taxi to come to the place that we want to establish the church. And we went inside one of the restaurants and then we're waiting for help. But then I felt that some people, they just came in and then they keep on helping them. And there we are just standing. And after 4 groups of people, they were helped. And I stepped forward and tried to cut in the 5th one. And I said, we were here. And why don't you help us? And they didn't respond, but they just ignore us. And then I tried to call the manager that I want to talk to him about this incident. And then I find out that they have to help those people first before they have to come to our help. And then I realized that this is a different culture, and I have to, just bear on this one because I cannot leave this place because my daughter was with me and we are hungry that evening. And there was no place that I knew because we were just catching right. So here I found out that it is because of we are a different people, and when you come in and then they don't really want to help because of our nationality. So I just, okay, I accept that. And then I just keep on asking them if they can just give us some food. We have to pay the food and then we go. And then when they finish, everybody finish and they were the last one to, get our food. And I just left with my daughter, went to the hotel, and then I don't want to, bother to entertain my daughter with that kind of thought. But it's really bothering me when we start out to reach out in the community, and I reach out to the Micronesian, and at the same time, I'm also reaching out to the owners of the church that we like to, use the church, their churches, so we can have the church to start out. That's one like I face at that moment that I start out the ministry in Atlantic, Iowa. And when we start out to look for like renting cars, and my license was from Honolulu, and they were asking me, where do I live in Atlantic? And I said, I rented hotel. And they keep on asking me questions on that. And I said, well, just let me know if you want me to rent your car. But these are the questions is, my license is still valid. And I told you that I'm just here for a short time. And I live in the hotel. I don't have any place here. And they are demanding me to present my ticket, returning ticket. And at that time, I was not bringing my returning ticket because I live it in the hotel. So I don't have car to go back again and get it and then come back again for the car rental. So that's another one that I look at as it's another way of, I feel that I was also looked on or looked upon for what I was trying to get help on that at that moment. That is a challenge also for me. And when I look at it's not only for me, but when I look at our people, our Micronesian community that we live together in Atlantic at that moment, and they share with us that they don't go to church because they feel that they are not accepted in that area. And when I try to find out about that, then I just I ignored that because that's not the way we have to entertain before we started the church in Atlantic. So that's one thing that I face to start out a church planting in Atlantic, Iowa. Okay, that's what I can say on the challenges, what I face from our group of people here in Iowa. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Nerleb. Pastor Jennie.
Hi there. I
Hi.
feel truly honored to be here, and I'm really very grateful for this opportunity. And I'm really very grateful to the General Church and also the NAPAT and all the contributed efforts and put there so that our stories will be heard. And then our stories become the part of, disciples' stories. It's an integral part of being a disciples. And then our stories will be transformed by the stories of God. So let me start my own experience, start telling all of you, sharing with all of you my own stories. And some of them is my direct experience, personal. And other part of that is from my eyewitness. Years ago, and I went to attend a program, a very short and brief, like a program, or I can call it a workshop, and to promote the connections among the immigrants or international students. So we sat in a circle, and each of us would take turn to answer the questions from the person who was in charge of this pro connection workshop. So usually we would answer our question. The first question where we were about to answer is about where we come from. So where are you from? Where are you from is the first question. So when it was my turn, and so I was given a second question, like, when will you go back? So it was pretty surprising for me. So I said immediately that I'm open to many opportunities. I may stay and to continue advanced study, or I may stay to serve in the church, or I may probably go back, and as I planned when I first came here. So that is the way I responded to that question. So where are you from, and when will you go back? So, but I thought also to myself, like, I wonder if the same person would throw that question at any American student who came down here in Texas from other states like Maryland or New York and Wisconsin, wherever else in the United States. So that's my own personal experience. And also I have a witness also at a discussion table when the person like was questioning or kind of like talking about or sharing his or her critique of American Christianity, and then the attendees or the participants, one of the participants would say, we're so glad to have you here. So, and then the discussion just went exploded. The discussion exploded, and then some of us really was really angry and got furious. So there was a time for us to, all of us there, to calm down and reconcile and seek the reconciliation at the table. So that's both my personal experience and also my eyewitness. So what I'm saying or want to share with the whole church is that just like love is an action word, so the way we talk to each other, the way we address each other, and even the way to welcome each other, is also an action word. So like the way we address the newcomers, and where are you from, and then when we will go back, and that's, so no words are neutral. So so I'm actually, I think it is an examples of systematic racism. So that's my stories. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Each of you have shared a painful story, but it also shows your grace in how you've managed the situation. And thank you so much for sharing your story. The next question is this. A couple of months ago, we witnessed massive protests in support of Black Lives Matter. What have you been thinking about regarding the need for Pacific Asian Islanders communities to join in solidarity with the Black community as they face racism in this country?
I'm going first.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Recently, the Black Lives Matter movement, that is the story we have to work within. Since we are minority here, as many of them is a first generation immigrant, our long history as an immigrant, as a foreigner, it affects us very tremendously, because the language is different and then our status is different. But we look back our history, the struggle is together. Sometimes the whole society, especially you remember the history of the LA uprising riot in early 1990. The society was a wedge between immigrant society, like a Korean and Black, and that in that way they want to kind of lessen the impact of the racism in the society. So we are solidarity with the Black Lives Movement. And then for that, I have the really great experience. Even though that event was postponed in 2022, our ministry, Obra Hispana and NAPED and the National Convocation, planned 2020, it's real. That is the joint meeting. And that will be happen in 2022. the thing I want to share is not that event. For that event, several members of each community gathered together. We have a preparation committee there, and then we are working together. I was surprised, and then I was blessed with how much we learn each other. And in the same token, I realized how little we know each other. So this movement should go on, but the basis of the main power to propel this movement is we have to know each other better. Our history, our culture, sometimes our misunderstanding. So during that meeting, I learned the history about Hispanic community, Afro-American community, their way of understanding of history and then theology, their daily life. That helped me actually personally a lot to have a hands together and then go the right direction. So we are here all together with that movement. That is not just the Black movement, brown or Asian movement, minority movement. That is a Christian movement. And in that purpose, we have to know each other better. So I think that is my lesson, and I want to share with you.
Thank you. Thank you. Pastor Nerleb.
Yes, thank you very much. I do really believe that, love is an action word that really demonstrated and revealed how we have love with each other. Working together can help the future. The future belongs to those who prepare today. If we work together and we join in hands with the Black community, and we know for sure that if we don't get to know one another, work together, or share together, or expressing our love for one another, that it won't help. But if we do this in our, among us or in our different churches or whatever that we may be calling our groups, and we share all this together, we know for sure that there will be changes now and into the future. But if we just continue this kind of like group, that group there, my group here, the other group there, then we are just making segregation or making different groups. But as love is only one word, love, and that love is a word that can, generalize or include everybody in that. So in order for us to, to understand the Black community, it is also our part as Christian. If we love people in our heart, then we have to reach out to them and include one another in our, whatever that we want to accomplish in life. If we want to have a good community, then we get together and then discuss what can we do as Christians in our disciples of Christ. I know that is the motto that we want to develop among the Christian churches and also the other denominations that we are friends with. So yes, we understand what happened in the last months, but we don't need to continue that. We have to just change that. By the way, we decided that we want to do right now a different thing that can help us now and also for the future. So my point is, we like to be part of what they call it the Black movement or whatever that they may call, because this is a human being this humanity. It's part of the creation that we are one. And when we are becoming one, we are in one love. And this love that we have, it is from our Creator. And that's how it demonstrated that we have oneness with one another. That is love. We express that among us when we gather together. I know that it's a kind of far away things among us, but you know, I know for sure that right now, many people may ask that the questions, if we want to involve with the Black movement. And of course, if we know for sure that what we are doing is right, we are going to be part of that. And as the Chuukese Micronesian community, we are new to United States. We are also new to Guam. We are also new to Hawaii. And when we face all these misunderstanding from our own communities where we live at, and we try to understand what can we do in order for us to have peaceful together. I was involved in finding a way of reconciliation between two Pacific Islanders in Hawaii, and I was involved in that one to reconcile the two groups together. And that's the group of Christian pastors that we were in Hawaii, and then we tried to put together the group from the other islands so that we can have a good relationship together. So when we coming here during this time of this kind of I can call it COVID-19, and there is a problem arises. And I look at it as something that we can do. The problem that arises, and there is a time for us, instead of pulling back, but we have to move forward and try to see what can we do in order to improve the life that we've seen on the street, and at the same time in our lives first. So from there, we can bring it to the church. It will start it from us first as leaders. So when I look at it, in order for us to joining the Black community, yes, we have to come together. And that is our decision. We decided that we have to go forward to do what is good for everybody. And that is what we are called to do. That is part of love in action. Thank you. This is what I want to share.
Amen. Amen. Yes. Pastor Jennie.
Okay, so my take of API and BLM, Black Lives Matter solidarity is, I think solidarity, just like we talk about, love is an action word, and so is the solidarity. It should be an action word too. So we talk about solidarity either as part of American dream, as a cultural ideals, or like Christian faith is a part of a Christian faith, and also the Christian virtues. We cannot talk about solidarity without being able to deal with the Black communities on their long history of oppression, slavery, and segregation, racism, and prejudice, discrimination that go along with that history. So that's something we're gonna deal with that. And solidarity, I also understand that is also the expression of a wholeness that we disciples. It's written on our front page, on our first page, on our website. So So I'm very much pro the Black Lives Matter. So without Black Lives Matter, and then we're not going to talk about the the worth and the dignity of our lives. So that's what we're gonna do, and then. But I also see like the solidarity to be promoted for the Black communities first should not be based on the ethnic groups. It should go beyond and transcend the ethnic lines on this land. So it should not be promoted, advocated, and also put efforts in as if there were a Black solidarity, Latinx solidarity, Asian American solidarity. All the solidarity should not be separated from each other. So what we're doing is also if API and the BLM are going to do the solidarity social costs, and that's actually what we're doing is to see how the diversity is also reflected in that solidarity. So I understand that as the most recent expression and also reflection about those basic words and the values that we disciples have been, promoting in this country. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all. Your insights are something that we can all learn from. Your visibility is so important right now, and thank you for your answers. The last question, I just to be mindful of our time, I'd like us for you to answer as succinctly as possible. All right. So we've heard each of your experiences on racism in your everyday life, and we hear your stories and we acknowledge them. Through it all, how does your faith empower you to resist racism? How does your faith empower you to resist racism? Chung Seong?
Racism, as an immigrant, the first generation immigrant, we have a kind of different way. I'm speaking from my personal experience. We have a different way of coping that racism. But as a Christian, I always look for Bible story. It's a story of immigrant and sojourner. Our Lord was a sojourner in Egypt. And first church after the persecution of Jerusalem, there was church in Antioch. That was immigrant church. And every church is immigrant church. But that church is action church who are doing some great work for the gospel. So whenever I receive racism, confront racism, my faith really helped because my Lord was an immigrant and my church is immigrant church. I'm working for immigrant church. That is helping me. But I hope the audience understand there's another way of, a special way of racism in NAPAD or Asian community. I said that's a language. I call it maybe linguism. So English is good. I try to improve my English as much as possible. But in certain point, I stopped doing that because I understand that the language is for the communication. Communication is not the one way. Communication is both way. So as long as I try to improve my English, you have to try to understand my accent. So that is something that we can do together. The reason I'm telling this story is that's the story of the Bible I understand. Abraham moved from Iran, modern day Iran, to Jerusalem. He moved to Egypt and then their descendant. And Jesus did the same thing. And then our apostle did the same thing. During that journey, I believe, they are struggling the same thing I am struggling right now. So my faith is a ground to overcome this issue.
Thank you. Thank you. Pastor Nerleb, briefly, how does your faith empower your resistance to racism?
Our first to come into United States to establish the churches, we recognize our own limitation, like English. That was our main thing. And when we try to speak with other people and we face like they don't understand us, the way we, our accent or whatever that we want to explain, but we want them to understand what we really mean. And then that's when they don't understand us. And then I, as like a church planter, I tend to continue just to pray for them and continue to really encourage myself to, continue to work as much as I can, to work hard, even though they don't understand me, but I will continue to, just keep asking them if they can allow us to, use their facility or to support us, to give us what kind of support that we need to have to survive in this cold area. When we come in from Honolulu, and it was hot, Honolulu. But when we reach Iowa, we felt that, oh, this is not the right time for us to come to Iowa because it was cold. But what we do is, there are some people that they saw us what we're wearing, and then they recommend that we have to go to the local store to get some of those used clothes that we can use. But in this way, I look at that there is some people, they are very nice to us. They also helping us to, to set up. They give us gifts like clothes and even food. They also contribute. They know that we are new to the place. And what we continue to build the relationships that we've seen from other people. We continue to contact them and build that relationship with them so that we can continue building the church and in that community. So when we do that, our faith strengthen out when we felt, we know that it's responded from the local community, that we visited them and they gave us different welcoming there. We know that they do welcoming us, and some they don't really bother for who we are, but we don't mind that. But we just focus on what we're doing, our faith in God. Our purpose for coming to that community is to, plant the church, planting the gospel that we need to put it out there or establish in that area.
Okay.
And
Thank you, Pastor Nerleb. Yeah.
Thank you.
Pastor Jennie.
Hey, talking about racism from the point of faith, I would say my embedded theology of that is the Imago Dei and the image of God. So that gives me my most intrinsic worth and also identity that no one can take it away, either by classism and sexism and the racism and whatever other forms of expressions of oppression, prejudice, and discrimination. So my take of the Imago Dei is that we are created in the image. All of us are created equally in the image and likeness of God. So, and also we are equally created for the stewardship of, all the rest part of the creation. So that's our privilege, and that's also both our privilege and the responsibility. So the racism as its core is a sin. So it's the brokenness of us from each other and from God, from each other, from the rest of creation, and even from ourselves. So, but we are we are just kind of like a built-in responsibility to respond whenever that brokenness happens in human relationship, in environmental protection, anywhere else, and even in some like psychological and also mental health and whatever it is. So it's our responsibility, and then it's the connection between humanity is something like given in that Imago Day, and also the compassion for each other, which is I think in every part of that is the opposite of racism. So that's my take of the from a theological point
Thank you.
about the anti-racism of social cause.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, all of you, for answering these questions. We now have questions from our audience here, and Shonda is going to facilitate that for us.
This was such a rich conversation and such an uncommon conversation that there were many more questions than we'll be able to get to in the next 10 minutes. So I want to acknowledge that there is a pastor from Atlantic who wanted to know more about Pastor Nerleb's time there. We won't have time to get to that. There was an excellent question about how we as immigrants and children of immigrants can be in deeper solidarity with our Native American family that we won't have time to get to. There were a number of great questions, but there are two that I want to get to. And the first, because it came from multiple people, is, are there ways that non-API, non-Asian Pacific Islander churches can deepen their relationships with NAPAD congregations so that we can begin the work of love over racism? But connected to that, there were several people asking, how can we help NAPAD fight racism? Because it's policies and laws and lack of policies and laws that are causing so much harm to our community. So that was the first question. I wonder, and not everybody has to answer them, but if any of you have any thoughts, and I'll be sharing one at the very end for our whole audience.
Chung Seong, would you like to take that?
Yeah, sure. One of the good way, the starting point to have a connection with the API Church and NAPAD congregation is engage with our local congregation. Even though our congregation is now small and then small in number, but it's the fastest growing congregation in Disciple. They are there to connect with them, and so whenever you have a opportunity or want to find the local congregation, you can contact with the NAPAD office. We can make a donation. Another way is every 2 years we have a NAPAD convocation, but NAPAD convocation is open to anybody. Actually, NAPAD membership is not limited only for the Asian or Pacific Islander. Anybody who are interested in our ministry and then have the same mind, they can join. So that is the first step I can recommend. And then you can go to the NAPAD website and then click the contact, and then automatically your email address is added to our instant contact list. That way you can receive our news and what's going on. So as I first said in the first time, our problem is we don't know each other better. We are invisible because we don't know others. So just contact us and then make a relationship. And if you need any help, I will do my best to help you connect with each other. And what's the later part of the question is, it is very hard to answer specifically. Can you repeat that, the later, second part?
Tell you what, we will get to that at the very end, I promise.
Okay.
So let me go ahead and jump in with another question. There were a couple of more questions. I wish we had an hour and a half because there have been questions that have acknowledged how complex it is for us to deal with first generation and
Yeah.
people who were born in other countries but moved here as children, and people who were born here, and how we have to build our connections to each other as we work to dismantle racism. There was a really good question about undocumented immigrants, because I think people don't talk about the fact that so many Asian Americans deal with the same injustices because they don't have documentation, and we don't have as many opportunities to talk about undocumented immigrants and refugees. And so I wish we had time to talk about that. One question we got in multiple forms was, how can we, as Asian and Pacific Islanders, be healing the rifts between us and the Black community? And also, how can we be learning from our secular young Asian American siblings? I think it's very famous that the K-pop fans have been fighting against systemic racism very hard and very successfully. So what can we be doing to heal those conflicts? What can we be doing to live an even deeper commitment to other people of color as part of our Christian witness as Asian Americans? One person shared how powerful it was at one of our NAPAD convocations that we joined with our Black brothers and sisters in singing the African American national hymn, Lift Every Voice, and what it means for us to show that kind of solidarity. What would that look like for us?
Pastor Jenny, this looks like a question maybe you can answer.
Part of it, I'm not quite sure about that part. The second question, learning from the secular second generation. If we had time, maybe we can just continue to talk on that. And I think I will first respond to the healing, the rift between the API and also BLM, and so on and so forth, and not merely the rift between API and the BLM, and also other ethnic groups. I think it is my take of that question, that issue is, starts, I think it starts with the leadership of the church, both like the NAPAD and General Church, and also the leadership of the particular congregation. And I think it starts from the pulpit, from the Lord's table. So in our preaching, in our worship, and also in our communion, the awareness of this rift to be mentioned, and to be mentioned and to be proclaimed, to enhance the awareness of the issue. And so that is the reality of the rift between API and BLM, and it is the reality that we are having about the racism. So that is what popped up right now in my mind. So it starts from, it is reflected in our daily church practice, in our ministry, in our pastoral care, and also worship, and so on and so forth. So it's an action. So the solidarity or the anti-racism is an action. It's not merely that, like, the theological, is not merely we just do the conversation talk and just leave it aside and after that. So that's my first take of that issue.
That's beautiful. We are almost at time. I really do. You all have so much wisdom for all of the questions that came up. But we did promise folks that we would get them out of here within an hour. So I want to express profound gratitude for the wisdom of this panel, for the ministries that you lead that are transforming your communities, that are providing healing and are addressing the conflicts that this nation unfortunately has created, and that we have to, through the power of Christ and through the power of our relationships, need to overcome. I am one of the anti-racism trainers for the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. My name is Shonda Jha. I'm a proud member of NAPAD. And on behalf of NAPAD, several people asked, what are some action steps that we can take? The first one I want to share with you is that back in April, NAPAD asked for all of us in this denomination to join in signing a document speaking out against the 800% increase in hate crimes against Asian and Pacific Islanders in this country in the wake of COVID. I've posted a link to that document and encourage you on behalf of NAPAD to sign it. Another very simple action step is, I know that you all know this already, but the last week of September and the first week of October is the Reconciliation Ministry offering. I have posted a link to Reconciliation Ministry on behalf of our Minister of Reconciliation, April Johnson. And also, if you go to that link, you'll discover a beautiful anti-racism Bible study that was generated between Reconciliation Ministry and the Disciples Peace Fellows this summer. If you don't know how to get into the street and march in behalf of your API and Indigenous and Latinx and African American siblings, if that's too scary, start by studying the Word and how it calls us to action. Because love is an action word. Because Christ enacted over and over love in concrete ways. And because as followers and not just fans of Jesus Christ, to quote my sister Verzola Law, we are called to constant vigilance against the evils of Satan, and I do believe that systemic racism, the policies and laws of oppression, are the work of Satan. And we are called to act in solidarity with Christ, a Middle Eastern man who would have been mistaken for the enemy in this day and age in this country. Let us stand in solidarity with our Savior. Let us stand in solidarity with each other. Let us go forth to do the work of Christ as we have been called. Amen.
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 Thank you all for being here.
Thank you so
for
much,
blessing.
Cisa and Sanda, and
Thank you,
also
everybody.
Chung Seong and Nerleb.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Blessings to you all. This is the end of our time together. Go and be
Okay.
blessed.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
God
You all
bless
were
you.
amazing. You were fantastic. That was a word that the community deserved to get to hear. Thank you.
Thank you so much, church, our
Thank you.
disciples.